poll questions coming up throughout the event. So if you're on a phone or on a computer, that might be a pop-up that you get. But for right now, we'll practice answering these questions in the chat just so that we can learn a little bit about some issues in our oceans before we get started with the official event. So my first question is asking, how fast do most corals grow? Now, this depends, and I know there's a lot of differences in corals, but I'm talking about not branching corals, so regular coral. About how fast do we think that they grow? Is it about 1 to 2 centimeters a year, 5 to 10, 70 centimeters, or about 2 meters a year? So you can go ahead and type your answers in the chat, ask your class. If your class has more than one answer, you can feel free to type more than one answer in the chat. So what are we thinking? I see we're starting to get some in. We've got about 5 to 10 centimeters. And just so that we can kind of picture, like 1 to 2 centimeters is pretty small. 5 to 10 is a little bit bigger. 70 centimeters, that's getting closer to a meter. Lots of guessing. Awesome. Okay, we'll maybe give you a few more seconds to try this one. I also have a little bit of information about coral too while we're answering. I don't know if most people know this, but coral are a type of animal. So they're actually closer related to jellyfish. Lots of people think they're plants, but they're not actually. They're tiny little colonies of animals that live together. So the correct answer for this one is actually A. They only grow 1 to 2 centimeters a year. So our friend Mala is going to tell us a little bit more about the issues with coral today. And this is kind of one of the big issues, right? They don't grow super fast. So when stuff happens to coral, it takes a long time for it to grow back. All right, my second one, sharks. How many teeth does the average great white shark have? And I don't know if you noticed my great shark background that I have today for our ocean theme. So do we think sharks have about 60 teeth, 100 teeth, 300 teeth, or about 1,000? So you can kind of see in that picture that I have on there, they have like all of these rows of teeth. So they don't just have one row of teeth like humans do. I don't know, how many teeth does a human normally have? It's definitely not 1,000. That looks so cool. You can see Mal showing us a cool shark tooth. So they're pretty big. They're like 2-3 inches big. Wowzers. Awesome. Some guesses. So D, we think maybe about 1,000 of those teeth. Some C's. And the other cool thing is like you can find shark teeth because they lose them and regrow them. So that's why you can get those shark teeth. I hope you didn't get that from a shark encounter that you had. All right, so this one, the correct answer for this one, ooh, we had some good guesses here. C is the correct answer. They have about 300 teeth. That would hurt to get bit with, I think. And we've got one more trivia question before we officially start. How much of the plastic ever produced is still in our environment? So we all know plastic takes forever to break down and it breaks into smaller and smaller pieces. Now, we do recycle some of our plastic, we burn some of our plastic, but most of our plastic ends up in landfills or in the environment, and they can end up in our water. So how much of that plastic do we think is in the environment still? About 20%, 50%, 60%, or 80%. And this number really is not going to make sense to a lot of people because it's such a big number, but there's about 8.3 billion metric tons of plastic that's been produced. So much, I feel like we can't even wrap our heads around it. No one really knows. Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, it's a big number. I'll give you guys a hint. It's a big number for this one. How much plastic is actually still in our environment? So for this one, the correct answer is actually D. About 80% of all the plastic ever produced is still in our landfills, in our oceans, in our rivers, floating around in our environment, inside the things that we eat. So that's another problem we're going to focus on today. So I gave you guys these trivia questions as a bit of a hint to our theme for today, diving into our changing oceans. So thank you so much for joining us. And thank you to our friend Mala from OceanWise, who's going to tell us a little bit more about coral reefs and sharks and plastics. And we can learn a little bit about some of the issues that our oceans are facing, but also how we can help them. So I'd like to begin with a land acknowledgement. So I'd like to acknowledge that I'm joining from Amiskwaciwâskahikan on Treaty 6 territory. This area that I'm in is colonially known as Edmonton, Alberta, but it's been a traditional gathering place and traveling route to many peoples, including the Cree, Saulteaux, Blackfoot, Métis, Dene, and the Nakota Sioux. And since we're joining from a virtual platform, I also want to take a minute to acknowledge the importance of the traditional territories that you're all joining from across the country, and to our friends that are joining us maybe a little bit later today or tomorrow from our traditional lands around the world. From coast to coast to coast, we acknowledge the ancestral and unceded territory of all the Inuit, Métis, and First Nations people that call this land home. Now, as we reflect on this connection to the land, it's really important to remember the water as well. So our rivers and lakes and oceans that connect and surround Turtle Island are what connect us and provide us with food, water, and oxygen. So we're really lucky today to be able to look a little bit deeper into this connection, not just with the land, but also with traditional waters, as we discover ways to give back to these resources and ensure that we have healthy oceans for many, many generations to come. Now, just to give you a bit of information before we get started, this is kind of the layout of what our event's going to look like. So we do have some time for Q&A at the end of the event. So I suggested the teachers, if you could maybe get out a piece of paper and write down a couple good questions from your class during the event so that we have a couple for our Q&A at the end. Of course, if any of you have a burning question throughout the event, you are more than welcome to type it in the chat and we can get to it when we've got some time. Oh yeah, I also had a little reminder. I think we only have some camera shy classes with us today, but if we do have anyone who is willing to turn their camera on and share, we do have this activity sheet that you all got with your registration package. It's a little cootie catcher shark that your students can create and share. So if you have anyone that's willing to share at the end of the event, just turn your camera on. You can come up to the camera. We would love to see them. If not, that's fine. You can also send us pictures of them later or just enjoy them yourselves. Yeah, and without further ado, I would love to welcome our guest presenter. So Mala Sharma, from cute and cuddly critters to creepy crawly insects. Mala has always had a passion and love for nature. She studied environmental studies at York University and embarked on her mission to become an environmental educator. She absolutely loves teaching about ocean conservation and is motivated to inspire youth around the world to take action against climate change. So welcome, Mala. It's so nice to have you. I'm going to pass the microphone over to you and you can go ahead and get started.
Thank you so much, Rebecca. Hello, everybody. My name is Mala, and I am so excited to be joining you all today and talking to you all about my favorite thing on this entire planet, which is our wonderful, wonderful oceans. I know I am coming from Toronto, Ontario, and I'll do a land acknowledgement as well. And while I do, I would love to hear about where you all are maybe joining from. So if you can, feel free to message me the traditional territory that you live on, and we can kind of connect there because our oceans are connecting all of us around the world. As Rebecca so beautifully said earlier, one thing that we all have in common is how much we connect with our oceans around the world as well. So I, for example, am from Toronto, Ontario, as I mentioned, which is the traditional territory of many different nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Huron-Wendat people. This land is now also home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. And I just want to honor this land and extend my thanks to the communities who have been here since time immemorial, taking care of our wonderful land, seas, and skies. One thing that I absolutely love about being an ocean educator is that I get to connect with people all around the world and talk to you all about OceanWise and our incredible oceans. So maybe some of you have heard of OceanWise before. We are a nonprofit organization, and we have a really important mission to empower communities and individuals to take action to protect and restore our world's oceans. Now, I want to know what comes to mind when you all think of the ocean. So feel free to message me in the chat and tell me what you think of when you think of the ocean. What comes to mind? I'm looking at the chat. Let's see. Sharks! Of course. If you take a look at my background, you might see some sharks swimming around, maybe. Jellyfish, of course. Oh, Nemo. Yeah, classic. So what I'm seeing here is a lot of people think about the incredible animals and the fish that live inside of our oceans. For sure. My friends, our oceans are going through a lot of different threats right now. And OceanWise is working really, really hard to solve some of these and come up with solutions for some of these threats. But the ocean is incredibly diverse and extremely beautiful. We use it for a source of water, food, medicine. It inspires culture, and it also produces most of the oxygen that we breathe. So although we think about a lot of animals and fish in the sea, of course, I think it's important to think about how we're all connected to that water and the cultural significance that our oceans also have to so many of us in different parts of the world. Now, at OceanWise, we are focused on solving three major issues, three issues that I'm sure a lot of you are already familiar with, and three issues that we're going to be talking about today as well, which include ocean pollution, overfishing, and climate change. So today in specific, we are going to be exploring three different things. We are going to be taking a look at what exactly is changing in our oceans. We're going to take a look at who is affected by these changes and what some actions are that we can take to make sure that we are helping our oceans stay nice and healthy for us and for also all those animals that rely on it. But before we jump into it, I actually had some of my own trivia I wanted to do with you all to kind of test your knowledge and see what you might already know about our ocean. So at this portion, I think we have some polls. So if you can answer on the polls, go for it. And if you just want to message in the chat, that is totally cool as well. And if you just want to discuss amongst each other in your classrooms, totally okay. So we're going to dive into this ocean trivia and see how much we know about our oceans. So the first question here, how many oceans are there on our Earth? Do we think there's 1, 5, 7, or 10? If you're just sharing amongst your class, you can show on your fingers as well.
I did just want to say, Malad, just to let you know, since I only have an ABCD and I don't want to confuse everyone, for this first question, let's just go in the chat. We'll poll for the next one.
Sounds good. There we go. We have some answers coming in. We have answers for 5 oceans. Some people are guessing around 7 oceans. I will show us the answer in 3, 2, 1. My friends, it's a bit of a trick question. I'm sorry to get us started with this, but we at OceanWise actually think there's only one giant ocean. There are no walls, no barriers in our oceans. All of our water is connected on this earth. So even though we might divide it up into different, parts of the world, there is really one big ocean that is all interconnected with the land and the sky as well. All right, next question here. We have approximately 35 million jobs are linked to the ocean worldwide. What do we think? Is that true or is that false? All right, it looks like mainly everybody's guessing true. All right, not too bad. I will show us the answers in 3, 2, 1. Oh, I think I got you all on this one too. This is false because it's actually 350 million people. So way more than we might think. There are a lot of livelihoods and a lot of people that are dependent on our oceans for their livelihood. So it's important to think about the different impacts that we have and how those impacts might be affecting people around the world who really, really rely on these ecosystems. All right, next question here. The ocean absorbs 25% of carbon dioxide emissions that human activities generate each year. What do we think? True or false? All right. I see a bunch of answers coming in for false, and we have 1 for true, I believe. All right. And the answer, I think I got into everybody's head. I think everybody thinks I'm tricking them again. My friends, the answer for this one is true. The ocean actually helps us fight climate change. Organisms like algae and kelp absorb carbon dioxide and are helping keep our air and water clean. All right, next question here. Life in the ocean produces more than 50% of the oxygen in our atmosphere. What do we think? I know a lot of times we think about where we get our oxygen from. We think about, trees and forests and plants. But we do know there are a lot of plants that grow underwater as well. And we do know we get a lot of oxygen from there. So what do we think? 50%? See a lot of answers for true. And the answer in 3, 2, 1. My friends, the answer is true. In fact, some research shows that the number could actually be closer to 60 to 70% of the oxygen in the atmosphere. So our oceans are incredibly important to us as we get so much from them. But the first issue that we want to talk about that the ocean is kind of dealing with right now is something that we hear a lot about, but there's a lot of different ways that we can kind of understand it and see how those impacts are taking place. The first issue that we're going to discuss today is climate change. Now, I know a lot of us hear about what climate change is, but climate change is the long-term change in global or regional climate average weather patterns. So weather is really, really important, and the temperature of our atmosphere and our oceans is really, really important. Climate is how the atmosphere behaves over a really, really long period of time. And when we talk about climate change, we're talking about changes that might be taking place for a long period of time, and even daily weather. We have beautiful ecosystems in our oceans called coral reefs, which Rebecca briefly talked about as well. And these are incredibly colorful and vibrant ecosystems that are so full of life. They only cover less than 1% of our ocean floor, but 25% of life within our ocean relies on them as their home. My friends, there's so much biodiversity on the reef. And some animals that you listed earlier when I asked you what you think of when you think of the ocean, those animals live in these coral reefs, like sharks, Nemo, somebody mentioned clownfish, jellyfish as well, sea turtles. So many different animals live in these ecosystems, but there is a very, very important animal that lives in these reefs, and they have a pretty bad rep, but they're actually super incredible and important animals in our oceans. They have a bunch of teeth, a really, really rough skin, and a triangle on their back. Maybe some of you guys might be able to guess who this guy is. We are talking about sharks. Sharks are a keystone species, meaning that we really, really need them to keep our oceans safe and keep them healthy. Without sharks, the ocean's ecosystems would probably collapse. Sharks are incredibly important animals in our oceans. And right now, a lot of sharks are losing their homes because of a threat that coral reefs are going through, which is something called coral bleaching. Unfortunately, coral reefs are being wiped out, and it's because the temperature in the ocean is getting too warm. When it gets too warm, unfortunately, corals and a lot of zooxanthellae, which is a type of algae, can't live in those conditions anymore. So they end up leaving those bodies of coral reefs, and the corals end up getting really, really weak, and they end up dying off. A lot of coral reefs around our oceans are dealing with these stressors and these threats. And because of that, the homes of our sharks are disappearing. These environmental changes can impact water temperature, nutrient cycles, decreases in productivity, and even the areas that sharks can have their babies. So it's really, really important that we try to protect our coral reefs so that our sharks still have a home to go to. There is a lot of hope. There are a bunch of projects taking place around the world that are trying to bring back those coral reefs so that our sharks and sea turtles and other animals have their home, and they're working. So do some research, take a look at what's going on around the world, and remember that it's not too late. There's still a lot of initiatives that we can get involved in that are helping rebuild those ecosystems. All right, next threat that we're going to be taking a look at is one that we're also probably a little familiar with, which is plastic pollution. So plastic pollution is the accumulation of plastic objects in our environments that are affecting humans, wildlife, and their habitats. I actually want to turn it over to you all. I'm sure we see a bunch of garbage wherever we're living, when we walk to school, when we hang out with our friends. I want to know, what plastic do you all see around you? So feel free to message me in the chat, or you can just discuss as a classroom. But what type of plastic do you see where you live or in your environments? What type of garbage are you seeing? I'm seeing people are saying food wrappers, bags, bottles, pens, plastic cups and straws. Another one for plastic cups. Oh man. For sure. A bunch of different litter. I'm sure even if you take a look around your classrooms right now or wherever you're sitting, you might be able to point out some plastic. Like when I look around, I see I have this glue, and this bottle is made out of plastic. Something that we don't think about, the laptop that I'm using to talk to you all today has a bunch of plastic in it. Even the clothing on my body that I'm wearing today has a bunch of microfibers in it, meaning microplastics. Virtually everything that we use today has some element of plastic in it. It is so cheap and easy to use, right? It's almost unavoidable to use plastic. But my friends, there is a really, really big plastic problem right now, and it's important to find alternatives to address this plastic problem, because there are animals that are being severely impacted by plastic, and one of those animals are our sea turtles. Sea turtles love to eat jellyfish, but unfortunately jellyfish can sometimes end up looking like plastic bags, and our sea turtles can't tell the difference, and they end up eating those plastic bags. And I don't know about you, but I don't want to eat any plastic bags. We all might get some tummy aches. And unfortunately, sea turtles are also getting really, really bad tummy aches, and it's hurting their health a lot. So it's important that we keep plastic out of our oceans to make sure that our animals aren't accidentally eating it. We at OceanWise are actually working super, super hard in our laboratories with our incredible scientists to learn more about plastics that are in our oceans, and specifically about microplastics. And microplastics are super, super, super small plastics that sometimes we can't see with our bare eyes. Scientists actually say that we have almost more than 500 times more microplastics in our ocean than we have stars in our galaxy. So imagine how much plastic that is, right? But as a scientist, it can be really, really tough to identify microfibers and clothing from things like algae and seaweed. This is an example of what microfibers can look like under a microscope. So today, I actually wanted to let you all be scientists yourself and try to guess if we are taking a look at microfibers or if we are taking a look at algae. Unfortunately, my presentation went down, so I'm going to get that back up. But while I'm getting it back up, I want you all to think about the different ways that plastics might be entering our oceans, because we all know it's ending up in our oceans. But how is that happening? And maybe we can revisit that at the end and share that with each other.
We also have, while you're loading your presentation, it's a good break because we had a good question. Can you fix coral in an aquarium and then return it to the ocean?
That is a great question. In fact, sometimes that's what scientists are doing. We at OceanWise are actually growing our own kelp. So we grow baby seaweeds inside of our lab, and then we go and replant it and re-put it into our oceans. So scientists around the world are growing tiny little polyps, which is the beginning stages of those animals, which are our coral reefs, and then reintroducing them into the ocean so that they can then grow and recreate those entire ecosystems. That's an amazing question. Thank you so much for asking that. All right, so our presentation is back up here. We are going to play Guess Who, microfibers or algae. So I'm going to show you all a picture, and I want you all to guess in your classrooms or in the chat, if you think it is a microfiber or an algae. So are we looking at really small thread, or are we looking at algae and plankton? So this is our first picture here. What do we think this is? Microfiber or algae? While we are guessing, I'll answer some of these questions in the chat. Somebody asked if animals eat plastic and poop it out. Sometimes, but actually plastic is really, really hard to break down. So it ends up just staying in their stomach, and animals think that they're full, but they're not, because the plastic isn't breaking down, and they end up starving to death. So it's really, really painful for them to eat all that plastic, and they're probably not going to be pooping it out. I see a lot of people guessing that this is algae. My friends, this is actually a microfiber. This is what plastic from nylon fabric looks like. So this is things like windbreakers and rain jackets. This is that material under a microscope. So first one already super, super tough. Let's move on to the next one. What do we think this one is? Algae or a microfiber? This one I'm getting algae, I think. A bunch of algae guesses here. And algae, for those of you who don't know, is really, really small plants that grow inside of the ocean. All right, some guesses for microfibers. I think people are worried that I'm tricking them again. I'm so sorry. I feel like I misled a bunch of you. No, I'm a genuine person, and that's why a lot of you all got this one right. This one is green seaweed, so this one is definitely an algae. I'll try my best not to trick you, I'm sorry. All right, next one here. What do we think this one is? Is this one a microfiber or an algae? I believe this is the last one that I have.
This one's being shy.
Everybody's worried about this one, eh? All right, we have a guess for a microfiber. Okay, lots of guesses for microfibers. Well, my friends, welcome to the OceanWise team. I'm officially hiring you all as OceanWise scientists because you got it right. This is most definitely a microfiber. This is actually from packing foam. So it's polyethylene, which is the plastic packing material that we use in a lot of our shipments. So things that we might order online, and that's stuff that keeps our packaging safe. Is also entering our oceans, and this is what it looks like. It looks so much like algae, but it is plastic. So you can imagine how hard it is to sit there by a microscope and try to differentiate between algae and plastic day by day. But it is super, super important work, and we're learning so much about plastics this way and how plastics are affecting our oceans by continuing this research. All right, my scientists, now it is finally time to move on to the final threat that our ocean is facing today. We are going to be taking a look at something that maybe you've heard of, but maybe don't know much about. We are going to be taking a look at something called overfishing. So overfishing is the removal of a bunch of fish from a body of water really, really quickly, so fast that in fact those populations don't have time to rebuild. So we're catching them a lot faster than they're being born. This is a really, really big problem for our ocean because unfortunately the baby fish aren't being given time to grow up into adults, and then because of that our oceans are ending up really, really empty. Something that I want us all to think about is in the beginning of our presentation when I spoke about how so many people depend on our oceans as their source of food and as their source of income. And a lot of it is because of the fish in the ocean. Without the fish in the ocean, of course, our ecosystems are going to collapse, but the people that rely on the fish for food and for jobs are also going to struggle economically and financially as well. So the ocean is super interconnected in a bunch of different ways that we live our life. I actually have a shark expert named Tom who wants to talk to you all a little bit about what overfishing is and what bycatch is and how it's affecting fish and sharks in our oceans.
One of the main threats that sharks have today is, well, there's three of them. There's overfishing, there's illegal fishing, and there's bycatch. Bycatch is when people try to catch a certain fish, but they drag the entire bottom or a big area of the ocean and they catch all these sharks even though they didn't want to catch them. But unfortunately, the sharks get caught in the nets.
There we go. So as Tom mentioned, unfortunately, there's a lot of overfishing happening. One way that we like to catch fish is we like to drop really, really big nets into the ocean, and you can't really control who's getting caught in those nets, right? It's really, really hard to be selective about the animals that are getting caught in those nets. So they end up trapping a bunch of other animals by mistake, like stingrays, jellyfish, whales sometimes, and then our beloved sharks as well. And that is what we call bycatch, when animals are caught by mistake. And this is a really graphic picture of sharks that get caught by mistake in those nets. All these animals being caught so much and removed from the ecosystem is having an impact on coral reefs, and it's having an impact on the food available for all the animals in the ocean. There's something really, really important that we have in every single life cycle, which is called a food chain. And a food chain is pretty much the system that animals rely on to get their food and what's necessary to keep healthy and stay alive. So for example, a food chain, small fish that live in our coral reefs are going to eat algae. So the algae that grows on our coral reefs, the small fish are going to try to nibble that up. And then we have bigger fish like groupers, for example, that come in, and they like to eat those small fish. And who likes to eat those big fish? Maybe some of you guys have some guesses, but it is our friend, the shark. Sharks like to eat big fish like to eat small fish, and small fish like to eat algae that grows on our corals. But my friends, does anybody know what would happen if we got rid of sharks? If there were no more sharks in the ocean, does anybody have any guesses? Maybe you can message me in the chat, or I'll give you a minute or two to just talk amongst each other in the classroom. What would happen if sharks no longer were in our ocean? All right, we have somebody coming in mentioning that there might be an overpopulation of the fish. Yeah, because there isn't anybody eating those fish anymore, right? For sure. Remember, I said sharks are a keystone species. So without them, there's going to be really, really big and dangerous consequences for the ecosystem. And you actually got it right. What would happen is all the big fish, because there's nobody eating them, would eat up all of the small fish. And if there's no more small fish, that means there's going to be a bunch of big fish and a bunch of algae taking over our coral reefs. And our coral reefs would end up looking super, super dirty, super, super messy. Algae would take over the coral reefs, and it wouldn't be very healthy and clean for the animals to live in. So my friends, it is super, super important that we keep sharks in the ocean so that they can do what they're supposed to do, which is keep balance in our oceans and in our ecosystems so that our coral reefs can be biodiverse and healthy and support all the life that lives inside of them. I see a couple questions in the chat, and then we will move on to the final portion of our programs where we're going to come up with some solutions to some of the problems that I highlighted that the ocean is facing. So I see a question here. What do they do when they catch whales? Because they're so big, for sure. Sometimes if whales get caught, then we can try to untangle them. But unfortunately, a lot of plastic waste that we're finding in our ocean is those giant fishing gear and like those giant nets that are being left behind or being washed into our oceans. And those whales accidentally end up getting caught in them, and it does really, really hurt them and kill a lot of the whales as well. So when we are catching whales, it is really, really hurting them, unfortunately. But there are people that try their best to find those whales and find those nets and try to keep them away from those populations for sure. What happens to the fish that they catch by accident? Can they release them or do they die? Unfortunately, a lot of the times, I think the fish do end up dying when they do come up onto the boats. That's why it's so important that we're trying to find more sustainable methods of fishing. A lot of indigenous communities have brilliant and ancestral ways of fishing that have been passed down through generations that are not only supportive of ecosystems, but they also help sustain life for them as well. So they've found a really, really good method of that balance, right? Making sure that they're still fishing, but respectfully. So maybe it's up to us to adopt some more of those fishing methods and sustainable fishing methods to ensure that we're not killing off too many fish by mistake. All right, my friends, I came up with 2 solutions here, or I offered sustainable fishing, but now I want to turn it over to you all. I want to know that when we think about plastic pollution and climate change and overfishing, what are some solutions that you all think of in regards to those 3 threats? I have a little notebook here, and I'll type in up all the answers that you send me into this notebook, and then we can all take a look at some of these answers together. So what do we think? What are some things that we can do to protect our oceans? All right, I see the first one coming in, educating others on how we can prevent it. Yes, that is actually my favorite solution. Just educating everybody about what's going on. In fact, today, I would like to challenge you all here to go home and tell 3 people what you learned today about our oceans. That way we can continue learning and keep those conversations going. Exactly. So educate others. All right, I see use less plastic. For sure. I see protect sharks from microfibers. Yeah, or just protect sharks in general too, right? All right, I see use non-harmful materials. For sure. So making switches from plastic to paper cups maybe, and not using plastic bags anymore, using a bunch of reusable bags. For sure.
I have an idea that I would like to add.
Yeah, for sure.
What about choosing seafood that we know is fished in a safe way that doesn't harm sharks?
For sure. A lot of us, I'm sure, love to eat seafood. Something that we do at OceanWise is we actually recommend something called sustainable seafood. So when you go to the stores with your parents, look out for the little OceanWise logo, which I'll show you in just a little bit. And that'll tell you that this fish was caught sustainably, or at least we believe that it was caught sustainably. So buy sustainable seafood. Exactly, for sure. What else do we think we can do? What is there? Maybe there's an activity that we can all do when we go to beaches or along shorelines, something that we can all do together as a class or as a family. This is also something that we do at OceanWise, and it's super fun. I am talking about leading a shoreline cleanup. So a shoreline cleanup, my friends, is when you get together with your friends or your family and you take a trip down to the beach or to the river or to the stream, or honestly, even a park, and you pick up all that garbage that you find and recycle it, get rid of it properly. That is directly removing all of the garbage that would normally end up in our bodies of water and eventually in our oceans, and putting it into the garbage and recycling it the way we should be in the first place. Amazing. These are some incredible solutions, my friends. Thank you so much for coming up with these. And I'm sure so many of you have so many more incredible, brilliant ideas that maybe you can continue sharing with each other after today's program as well. But here I have 3 solutions that we at Oceanwise oftentimes always recommend. So the first one that we have here is choosing sustainable seafood, as I mentioned. So if you see this Oceanwise logo on any fish when you go to the market with your parents, that means that it was probably sourced sustainably. So we recommend that this is a more sustainable choice. And that way you are being more conscious of the food that you are putting on your table. The second thing that you can do is buy locally, support those local businesses and support those local fisheries. And that can also be very, very sustainable as well. And the last thing, which someone already mentioned in the chat, which I think is the best thing, and also one of my favorite things to do myself, is just tell your school, your friends, and your family. Share what you learned and keep those conversations going, because by talking about it, we are actively raising awareness and keeping those conversations going and maybe educating the public on what's going on. So that'll make a really, really big difference as well. Over here, my friends, I have a really, really fun ocean animal quiz. So you can all scan it and maybe do it as a class, or you can do it individually. Rebecca also sent it in the chat, so you can take it through the link. And you'll answer a bunch of different questions. And at the end, it'll tell you what ocean animal you are. But I'd like to thank you all so much for logging on today and taking time out of your days to learn about our oceans and learn about sharks and coral reefs and what you can do to help our changing oceans. I hope you all learned something new. And I think if we have a couple minutes left, I can definitely stay on and answer any ocean questions about animals or the oceans, or about what I do, or any questions anybody has.
That's awesome. I did notice, I think 1 or 2 of our classes did have to hop off, but yes, you are all welcome to, while we're still here, scan the QR code and do that quiz or ask any last questions. I do have one last question that I do like to ask our presenters. Do you have any, a takeaway message or something that you would like the children to leave today, having in the forefront of their mind?
Yeah, honestly, I think one of my favorite things about the ocean is something that I've mentioned a couple times today, and that is that we all rely on the ocean and we're all connected to the ocean. So every time we buy something from the store, or we eat something, or we throw away something, I think we should all think about the impact that it's not only going to have on us, but also people around the world. So think about how we're all connected and how we all have a role to play when it comes to protecting and restoring our oceans. I think that's what I want everybody to leave with.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I do have a couple quick reminders too for those of us that are still here. We are partnering again with Oceanwise for our Live from COP event. So we're going to talk more about ways that you can help the ocean. And if you want to see our youth that are on the ground in COP in Dubai, this is a great event for you to come to. So just head over to our website, CG Education, to register for that one as well. If you'd like to see Mala and myself again. And of course, if you haven't done so already, please register for our newsletter. So our newsletter is the best way to stay up to date on all of these good upcoming events. I don't want you to miss any other fun new things that we have on the horizon. So make sure if you haven't done so already, you've registered for our newsletter. And yeah, that's it. I wanted to say thank you. Thank you so much to all of our schools that are here with us right now, and those of us that are joining us later on YouTube. And of course, a huge thank you to Oceanwise. And thank you so much, Mala, for sharing your expertise and your love for the ocean with everybody today.
Thank you all so much. Thank you for having me, and we'll see you in December for our next.
Awesome. Yes, sounds good. Kate, thank you so much. Have a great day, everyone.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Thank you.